How to Write a Resolution, and a big welcome to those of you who are here with us tonight, as well as those of you who may be watching this later on our YouTube channel. Again, I am so excited to have all of you here to get into how to write resolutions and how to do so in a way that'll help you stand out in committee, how to ensure that your solutions are fine-tuned and ones that everybody wants to get involved with, and how to ensure that at the end of the day, you are making a positive change in the world and one that your chair will notice you for. So with that, to get into things, I'd like to start by having you all introduce yourselves a little more, which I see that some of you are already doing. So feel free to share your first name, where you're from, whether you're a teacher, a student, or a parent, and what you're hoping to learn from this event. Feel free to also let me know if you've done any Best Delegate programs in the past, what your level of Model UN experience is, any of that fun stuff. Cool. Hi, Michael. All right, Michael's from Haiti. Very cool. I see we've got an international community with us. Seanbeer's from Michigan. Hi, Seanbeer. Nice to see you again. Kylie, beginner students, welcome. Hopefully I can give you something to help your beginner students out and get ready for their next conference. Let's see. Evan from California. Nice to have you here, Evan. Nice. Georgia. Cool. Wow. We've got people from all across the country, all across the globe. Seems like a really great place to talk about solving world problems, right? So with that, I will continue to go ahead and jump into things. Now, before I get into these slides, since you're all so kindly taking a moment to introduce yourselves, I should probably take a moment to introduce myself too, so you all have a little bit of a better understanding as to why I'm here telling you about resolutions. And before I hit my introduction, just a note, I'm from New York. There's this great stereotype about New Yorkers, actually two of them. One, we walk way too fast, and two, we talk incredibly quickly. If you had not already picked up on it, the second of those two is definitely true about me at times. If at any point I start talking really quickly and I'm speaking at the pace of a high-speed train, please, somebody, post it in the chat for everybody's benefit and let me know, and I will slow down. Cool. And with that, a little more about me besides I talk really quickly. So my name is Georgina, and I'm one of the Model UN mentors, as well as community manager with Best Delegate. Now, why I got into Model UN in the first place? I started doing Model UN when I was in 8th grade. And it wasn't because I knew what this activity was and was so ready to go. I had no idea what Model UN was. I was actually absolutely terrified of public speaking. So at the time, right, I get up in front of more than 5 people, like that was my maximum. And step 1, you could see my hands start shaking. Step 2, my face would turn the color of a tomato. It is possible, it happened frequently. And step 3, I would sprint out of there as fast as I could. My teachers would have to be like, stop, it's okay, you got this, everything's great, it's fine, you can do it. I so did not think I could do it. That was not where we were at. So I had a friend, right? And I really considered her to be a mentor at the time. She was like, hey, Georgina, you should really try this activity called Model UN. Might help you out with the public speaking and you'll probably really enjoy it. I walked into that first club meeting and I never looked back. And then I attended my first conference and I was sucked in forever. But aside from falling in love with kind of the public speaking aspect and the way that it helped, I fell in love with the way that I got to talk about these issues that I was reading about all the time, but never got to actually discuss in any of my classes. And from there, that so much inspired me to keep learning about these that I wanted to go to Georgetown to continue to study international politics and all of these issues. I continued to do Model UN while at Georgetown. I ran their team my senior year, and I gave a speech in front of 3,500 people at the closing ceremonies of our high school conference. 8th grade me would not believe you if you told her that, and that is absolutely thanks to Model UN. And as a result of learning about all of these cool things in the world, after graduating from Georgetown, I spent a year working for a Model UN company in India. I spent some time volunteering with agricultural cooperatives in Morocco, and also spent some time with the Peace Corps in Thailand before being evacuated because of COVID. And now I'm still working with Best Delegate, which is absolutely my passion, and I so much enjoy doing it. So Model UN and learning about these issues takes you places. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit more about what it's like to solve them. And a little bit more about Best Delegate as well as an organization. We truly see the impact that this activity has. We've had over 10 million views of our resources in all 193 member states. Students, just like some of you, out here really trying to touch on and solve these issues. We've also had over 100 countries represented by students who've done our programs. We have an international community of people just like you who are going to be the next leaders solving these problems. So I'm so glad you're here tonight. Can show you how to solve them. You can keep doing it after this. And we also get great ratings. We have fun doing Model UN, and I hope you all get a taste of that tonight. So without further ado, what to expect from this next 53 minutes that we have together. I'm going to get into why write resolutions in the first place. Like, what is the point of this grand document? Why does the UN do it, and why should you be doing it? Then I will show you how to do it. So overview how to write a resolution in terms of the basic elements that you should have included. Then I'll go over our SMART resolution checklist. So how to make sure that every solution that you have included is something that really makes an impact and something that'll stand out and the chair will see and will be like, that's an awesome solution. Then I'll answer all of your questions. Great questions ahead of time. Can't wait to answer them. And then I'll give you guys some resources that you can take away and then really use those in terms of leveling up your skills. So to preface, why resolutions? I'd like to start off by asking you all a pretty important question. What are some of today's biggest global challenges? What is going on in the world? What have you read about in the news? What have you debated in recent Model UN committees? Feel free to toss some answers in the chat. Oh, you guys got there before me. Yeah, so there's been a lot of news, for example, about the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the continued war going on in Eastern Europe, and specifically about the fact there hasn't been a resolution and there's consistent escalation, or at least there has been in terms of multiple sides. Definitely racism, poverty, inflation. There are a ton of issues surrounding the World Cup. We might get into that later. Climate change, a consistent big issue that was just touched on at COP27. The situation in Afghanistan is still something that's at the top of the international community's agenda. Protests, COVID, FIFA corruption. As you can see by the rate at which you are all just continuing to post these in the chat. On a day-to-day basis, like if you have any news apps downloaded on your phones, we see this. We are acutely aware that the world is filled with these challenges, but it's through resolutions that we get to solve these. And through writing resolutions that the UN really starts to tackle each and every one of these issues and really tries to find solutions that take the world forward to a better place. So why resolutions, right? How on earth are we solving these issues? Why is this what happened? I'm going to start by taking you a little bit back in time. So before the UN existed, right? And this will really help you frame why the world solves these problems today in the way that it does. Before the UN even existed, the world was caught in this really tricky place of escalating conflict. Now I'm going to ask all of you, and there's an answer I frequently get that I'm expecting, but I feel like some of you might actually not. We'll see. What was the cause of World War I? From what you've learned in a history class, why did World War I happen? Why did this global conflict suddenly take place? Any answers for me? What caused World War I? What did you learn in your history classes? Yes, I got the answer I was looking for. So your history classes will typically boil it down to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand II. I'm seeing that so many times in the chat. That's the history class answer. Awesome. So yes, the big event that kicked off World War I was the assassination of Franz Ferdinand of Austria. However, that event did not happen in a vacuum. Like, the assassination of this one guy was not the sole cause, and there is so more to this story. So before World War I, right, all of these countries had issues with each other. Everybody has issues with each other every once in a while, right? So they consistently fight about really small things, but they had no place to sit down and talk about them. So say that like somebody came over to me and stole my gavel while I was chairing a committee. I typically go and talk to them about it instead of just like throwing an entire army their way. But they'd have to send a diplomat or an advisor who'd go all the way to this other country and be like, you don't like what you just did. We've got issues with this, and this is what we'd like to do. But then that other country has to then get their diplomat and send it all the way over to this other country. And then they have to talk about it. And then they need to go all the way back to that other country, except this issue involved 5 other countries. And now we're all already at war because we didn't talk to those 5 other people. And it took us a really long time to go forth. Countries had no way to all sit down in one place. So at the end of World War I, All of these world leaders sat down and called this the war to end all wars. They were like, that was really, really bad, guys. We're not going to do that again. Absolutely not. Atrocities were committed, and we never want the world to get back to that place. So they created the League of Nations, which was kind of the precursor body to the UN that we see today. However, something happened. It's on the screen. Did the League of Nations work? Did it fulfill its cause of preventing a future war? I'm seeing some head shakes. The League of Nations failed to do so, right? This organization that was supposed to bring about peace did not work. And here's why. Countries had unequal votes. Not every country was represented in the League of Nations. The idea for the League of Nations was actually included in the 14 points of Woodrow Wilson. The United States didn't join. So you've got this big country who's kind of a big player on the global stage. They're like, no, all of these other countries who want to be part of it, they're like, no, you can't join us. And so World War II broke out because this idea of having discussions wasn't kind of carried out through everyone. Now, this is where the UN comes into play. At the end of World War II, hint, they all sat down again and looked around, I'm sure, at each other and were like, can we promise we weren't going to do that? And we did it again. We need a better solution. So in 1945, they signed the San Francisco Charter, and they created the United Nations, which aims to once again prevent war and also solve the world's problems. But with the UN, they did it differently, and this is going to lead into resolutions. So they created these guiding principles, these values that they thought were incredibly important in everything they do, and these should always be carried through any solutions you write. Above all else, maintaining peace and security, including maintaining countries' sovereignty and guaranteeing them the right to control their territory within their borders. Human rights, making sure that every single person on this planet gets equal rights and equal opportunities. Rule of law, ensuring that there's a system of justice, rules and laws that can be followed to really hold the system in place. And development, continuously striving for a better future and a sustainable future for everyone. Now, how exactly do they do this? How did they do this differently? And what does the UN system look like? So in terms of resolutions, the UN General Assembly is this big committee that replaced the League of Nations and the purpose of the League of Nations. It has every single member state included, and this is most typically simulated in Model UN. They recommend action. So these resolutions are non-binding. They don't demand that countries do things, but because countries all agree to them, they all do what's said in them, because it's a matter of trust and a matter of writing them together. So as it says here, 80% of resolutions pass by consensus. They all negotiate so well, they don't even have to vote on them because they all know that they're going to vote yes. So that's how the GA works. They negotiate and they solve problems. The UNSC has 15 members, 5 permanent. They write binding agreements to deal with situations that need to be resolved now. P5 have vetoes. And then there are a couple of extra UN bodies. So in Model UN, this is what you do. You step into the shoes of these leaders to solve these problems and really get to address this from a really cool perspective in terms of moving forward and coming up with solutions. Now, a huge part of this is resolutions, which is what the UN aims to do, right? Anytime you walk into a Model UN committee, you want to solve this problem. You don't just want to sit there and list out every issue that's ever happened. You can break Model UN down into these 5 stages. So research, debate, negotiate, resolution, action. The first ones lead you up to writing your resolution. And when you take action, it's voting on the resolution. So by learning how to write a resolution, you're setting yourself up for success throughout the entirety of a Model UN committee. And to show it to you within the terms of the committee flow as well, you focus on resolutions for a large part of any committee. So you'll open debate, you'll give your opening speeches, and then you'll debate the issues that you're going to solve. Then for the rest of committee, you're writing these once you negotiate, and then you're debating them, and then you're voting on them. So it's a strong document that'll set you up for success. Now, the moment you've all probably been waiting for, or at least the first one, she's talked an awful lot about what these do, but how on earth do I write one? Surprise, I'll get into it in just a second. So, in terms of how to write a resolution, Resolution, just to define it very clearly for all of you, it's the written document containing your block or your group's solution to the topic at hand. So say you're debating climate change, it would be to solve that. Nuclear disarmament, it would be to solve that. So in terms of resolutions, this is the written document that essentially outlines your solutions to each of these problems. And it's got 3 sections. So it starts off with a header. Then you've got your preambulatory clauses. And have no fear if this is your first time learning about resolutions, you've never heard the word preambulatory clause before, you're like, that's a really strange word. I'm going to break these down for you in the next couple slides. And then finally, you've got your operative clauses. And this image on the left shows you what that looks like when you put it all together. So in terms of your header, and I'm going to make this as simple as possible for all of you, if you ignore the formal language, so the words that are very UN-y, and compare it to writing a paper for school, which I'm sure many of you have done, it can be broken back into exactly the same process. So in terms of kind of thinking about this, right? Every resolution starts with a header. So you write out the committee that you're in. That's the same as when you put the class that you're in at the top of your paper. Then you put the topic that the committee is discussing. It's the same as when you write the assignment that your paper is for, right? So you let them know this is where we are and this is what we're doing. Then next, you've got your sponsors. This is the list of countries who have written your resolution. Just like when you hand in a paper for class, your teacher needs to know who wrote it. So you always put your name on it. We want to give you credit where it's deserved. So that's what the sponsors are. And then signatories are other countries who want to hear this presented. So they want to hear it read aloud. These are going to be people who agree with this. This is like your teacher who wants to read these. And I can see in the chat questions regarding getting these slides. This event we're recording will be uploaded to YouTube by the end of the week, and it will have the slides and the screen share. So feel free to refer back to that at the end of the week. I hope that answers your questions. So that covers the header. In terms of the next section, so kind of moving on with this extended paper metaphor. And the example that I've got here is the World Tourism Organization, because I figure the holidays are coming up. Many of you might be traveling. Nice time to maybe think about tourism. So in terms of your preambulatory clauses, to go back to our metaphor of writing a paper, your preambulatory clauses are like the introduction to your paper, right? So in the case of a resolution, if your goal is to solve problems, the introduction is probably explaining which problems are we solving. So in terms of your preambulatory clauses, these outline the issues that you plan to solve, as well as outline any past actions that the UN has taken that you agree with, that you think kind of might go along with your resolution, etc. And in terms of formatting, the first word is italicized and they end with a comma. So in this little tourism example that I've got going on here, right? First one reads, alarmed by the contribution of tourism-related activities to climate change. Definitely an issue that's discussed with tourism in terms of emissions, biodiversity, hotspots, etc. And then in terms of the second one, reaffirming the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal agenda, that's just calling up a UN resolution that's worked really well, that is continued to be used and something that you might want to build on. So that is your preambulatory clauses, introducing the issues that you plan on solving. Now on to the most important part of your resolution, AKA the main argument of your paper, right? So the main argument of your paper is really what you're trying to do, what you're trying to get across. In a resolution, it's the same thing. So your operative clauses are the solutions to the topic at hand. So in terms of the format, these are numbered. The first word is underlined and they end with semicolons. And again, these include your solutions. So the examples here, 1, recommends that member states increase efforts to protect biodiversity hotspots, including by limiting the number of visitors, enforcing no litter guidelines, and developing waste management and pollution control protocols. This aims to address the effects of climate change. So you've got your issue in your preamps and your solution in your operatives, and then calls upon states to strive toward the creation of a sustainable tourism sector by 2030. That ties into the SDGs and kind of pulls the whole thing together. Now, as I've said, it's a lot easier to compare this to a normal paper in terms of analyzing it without all of these fancy languages, right? So a pro tip when you're writing resolutions, write a normal person sentence first. People do not like this. People do not naturally write like this. I do not go around saying recommends that. It's so much easier to write it as a normal sentence first and then MUNify it. And just a note, you always want to have more operative clauses than preambulatory clauses, right? Have more solutions than issues, or try and solve every issue you have. If you're not solving it, maybe leave it out of your preambles. To get a little further into what I mean by write a normal sentence and then MUNify it. So take the same operative clause I had on the last slide, but I've shortened it. If I was thinking about solutions, what I might say aloud would be, countries should protect biodiverse areas, and they might want to do that by limiting the number of tourists who can visit. That is a very normal sentence. That is something that I might say out loud. So then I'd write down that sentence, and then I'd pick an operative phrase to put in front of it. So in this case, calls upon. Add in a member state, and it's now a clause, right? Calls upon member states to cap the number of annual visitors permitted at biodiversity hotspots. So you don't have to overthink this. Write down a normal sentence and transform your normal sentence into a clause, and that'll lead you straight to success. Now, from here, I want to get into a resolution checklist. So how to ensure that every operative clause that you write has every element in it that'll ensure that once you hit authors panels, as an example, so when you are kind of presenting these and answering questions, you have prepared your resolution in a way that the discussion will be around your solutions instead of pointing out things that your solutions might be missing. So this checklist will ensure that each of your solutions is concrete, that it's got specific goals in mind, for example, that it's very clear what this is built to do, and that within its design, the solution makes sense and there's nothing missing. That's what this resolution checklist will help all of you to do. So in terms of, again, strengthening your resolution, have any of you ever heard of SMART goals? If you've got your camera turned on, if you've heard of them, like raise your hand. I see some nods. Yay, love that. I love SMART goals. Awesome, excellent. So SMART goals, right? They stand for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So anytime you set goals, you should think about it like this. Set goals that are specific, set goals that are measurable. Your goals should be attainable. We love realistic goals, time-bound goals, excellent. Apply this to your resolutions as well. And this ensures, as I said before, that your authors panel, so when you present these, will run smoothly, that you'll have answers to questions you think you might be asked, that each of your clauses will cover everything about this solution so that you won't be nitpicked, for example, not having funding. And I'll get into funding in a sec. And finally, it ensures that you get votes. If I'm looking at a bunch of resolutions and see one that I'm like, these solutions are so clear, and I could see this like being put into place right now because of the way they've created it, like people are going to vote for that, and your chair is going to think it's awesome. So what exactly does this checklist look like? In terms of a SMART resolution checklist, for every solution you create, these are the questions you should be asking. Does this solution have a clear goal? Why are we doing this? What is the point of this program? What is the point of this initiative? Why? If there's no goal, you might want to rethink the solution. This is like the most important one. Then who is impacted? So who exactly is this solution trying to help? Is it an entire country? Is it a specific region? Is it a specific group of people? Who are you helping? Where will it be implemented? Where are you doing this, right? So a very clear example of this is I've seen in UNSCs before, so security councils, people saying, we want to deploy peacekeepers. You need to say where you are deploying the peacekeepers. Pretty important. You don't want peacekeepers lost, not something we're hoping for. So where are you going to do this? When will it be implemented? Is this something that'll take place over the course of 2 years? Is this something that'll take place over the course of 6 months? Is this a 2030 sustainable development goal agenda? When are we doing this? Who is responsible for this? There should always be somebody in charge, right? Solutions don't run themselves. If you're running a program, pick somebody to be in charge, pick a country, pick a government, pick a civil society organization. Make sure you've got some form of management. How will it be funded? Solutions need money. Think about where that funding is going to come from. Consider World Bank, for example, the IMF, consider grants, loans. Think about your funding, have an easy answer to that. And then how will you measure success? How are you going to show that this is working? Are you going to report on it annually? Are you going to have different kinds of impact studies? Whatever it may be, find a way to prove that your solution will continue to work. And this is exactly what the UN does. So these are a couple of real life examples of what I would consider smart solutions that the UN put into place. And these ones are also great examples of what we call branding. So solutions that are highly memorable. And if you're the one to come up with this, to name it, and everybody's talking about this, you know that your idea stands out, and you know that you've been a leader in committee for creating this really cool idea that is easy to talk about. It's very clear what it does, and everybody's on board with it. So in terms of the Zero Hunger Challenge, right, kind of says it in the name. They are aiming to end world hunger, and they've got a bunch of different sub-projects in different regions that go about doing that. Check out their website, pretty cool. 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. Sorry, I've been talking for a while. These are a set of 17 goals that they aim to achieve by 2030. Again, there's a specific number of goals, there's a specific time frame, 2030, everything's awesome. Then there's the Loss and Damage Fund. This is a new one. So at COP27, they agreed to this fund for developing countries to help them really build this kind of clean infrastructure, green infrastructure, and develop in a clean, sustainable way. This is a really cool idea in terms of countries helping other countries, in terms of funding for countries, in terms of really building up these climate-friendly projects. Then there's Trick or Treat for UNICEF. This is one that is very familiar within the US context. Have any of you ever done Trick or Treat for UNICEF? Yes, no, maybe, yes. See, I did Trick or Treat for UNICEF. So the general concept, UNICEF will create these little boxes for Halloween. It's to raise money for UNICEF. They do great things for education. And tons of kids will then bring out these little boxes while they're trick-or-treating and also trick or treat for UNICEF. A lot of families are also aware of this. And so they'll have change on the side to put into the box. So every Halloween, UNICEF raises a lot of money for education. There's the Education for Justice Initiative. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime started a bunch of really cool education projects, really framed around dealing with rule of law. Model UN is one of them. The UNODC was running a ton of cool Model UN projects around the world to try and teach rule of law. Pretty awesome. And then He for She. Pretty common one. Emma Watson was the face of it for a while, and it aimed to get equal voices in terms of talking about gender issues within the world. So those are some real-life examples of smart solutions. Before I answer your many questions, I want to take a moment to get all of you to try this. So one of you did mention this earlier when I was asking for things that have come up in the news today. The World Cup is currently happening. Really cool event that every 4 years brings the whole world together in terms of there are a bunch of countries playing soccer against each other right now. Everybody's got a team they support. People really love the World Cup. But at the same time, there have also been a number of issues surrounding the World Cup, and not just this year, right? And a lot of the time, I had someone say this to me the other day, the World Cup, these global events, tend to mirror politics, or at least a lot of the issues going on in the world. And they become highly visible at these events too. So there are a lot of things to talk about, right? So some potential issues if we're going to MUNify it World Cup edition. There's been a lot of talk about the ways that the stadiums were constructed. There's been a lot of talk about the climate. There's been talk about human rights issues, about LGBTQ+ issues, and there have been protests at a lot of recent events. So these are a couple of the issues that have been mentioned in terms of news stories related to the World Cup. Here is my challenge for each of you. I would like you to think of a solution. It can be so simple to one of these things. Write it as a normal sentence for me in the chat, and I'll pick one to read aloud. And then I'm going to ask all of you to try and MUNify it for me in the chat using one of these operative phrases. So I'd like somebody in the chat, or many of you, write a one-sentence solution to one of these issues, and then we will try and touch on it. And not crisis-based solutions. I would love some general assembly-style solutions. In terms of the question that I got in the chat and the relation of LGBTQ+ to the World Cup, there were a number of teams who were planning on wearing rainbow armbands to show their support of LGBTQ+ issues and communities. The World Cup and kind of the group that's responsible for the stadium banned players from wearing those. And so it relates a lot to kind of freedom of expression and a lot of people being able to really support those rights as well as causes on a public stage. Okay. I see a couple in here. So let's see. Okay, here's a sentence. People should refrain from littering the atmosphere to decrease climate change. So if we're going with people should restrain from littering the atmosphere to decrease climate change, I'd say requests. People refrain from littering in an effort to protect the atmosphere. How easy was that? Let's see. This one's already in resolution format, requests countries to investigate FIFA on past incidences. Excellent. See, operative clause, so simple. Let's see. So yeah, here's one. Country should create a committee that has oversight for FIFA to ensure no corruptions. This one's great. You just have to delete the first two words. Instead of countries should create a committee, you say create a committee that has oversight for FIFA to ensure no corruption. Let's see. Allow people to represent themselves how they would like during the World Cup. Emphasizes the need for FIFA to allow everybody to represent themselves however they choose during the World Cup. Let's see. Encourages nations to establish not only better labor regulation laws, but also better human rights laws, utilizing IMF interest-free loans as the prime encouraging factor. This one has some great smart elements included. I see a funding mechanism, nice work, reminds countries to make laws, emphasizes the building should be built without corruption and safely. These are awesome. Stadiums should make people clean up after games like they already do in Japan. So recommends that all stadiums encourage all participants to clean up after games. See, we're all agreeing on this. If only FIFA were listening to us. Apologies if you don't get this topic. That's okay. There's a whole world of Model UN topics out there for you to debate and discuss. This is only one of those and a non-traditional one that I did for fun because I think it was something relevant to today's world events. But there are so many events out there and so many global issues that you can do exactly this with, right? So for your next Model UN committee, are we all going to try and write normal sentences and then modify them? Does this sound like a plan instead of trying to write with crazy language? Yes, no, maybe so? Yeah, I see some nods. I think so. Sounds like a plan to me. So with that, I want to start to get answering all of your many questions. Now, there were a bunch of them that were pre-submitted to me, so I am going to start with those ones. And then if you have further questions, feel free to post those in the chat, and I will also make sure to address those once I cover this first set. Now, in terms of the questions that were pre-submitted, I've organized them into different categories and kind of fit them together in a way that seemed to make thematic sense to me. So I've organized it into first kind of general questions about resolutions. Then I'll get into kind of how to research to make this happen. Then I'll get into how to prepare to write resolutions, how to prepare for Model UN committees, how to train your students, general preparation stuff. And then from there, I'll get into how to do this in committee. So I got some questions about leading your block, that kind of thing. I'll touch on that. And then finally, I will continue to answer other many questions. So the first question that I got, and this was from Alex, are there any drastic differences between Model UN resolutions and real UN resolutions? Fun fact, there is a paragraph on the UN website that talks about this. I actually found it when I made a specific answer to this question. The UN knows about Model UN. Here's the big difference, and I actually touched on this at the start of this presentation. In the UN, 80% of resolutions pass by consensus. So within the UN, they negotiate so well that when they're writing these, they ensure that there's something that everybody wants, which means that they don't get to the point of voting on them because there's so much agreement and they strive for that. The UN was built to be a place where countries really want to work together to agree, and it creates incentive for agreement, which helps us avoid conflict. But in the case of Model UN, we do vote on these. We ensure that we vote on these. It's all part of the process, and within Model UN as well, there are many more different blocks typically than you'd find in the UN, at least at really big conferences. So we allow you to break up into different groups and to find your own groups and to figure out who you want to negotiate and cooperate with based on the research you've done. So the resolutions themselves, the written document actually looks very much the same. In the preambles, the header, the operative clauses, Google a UN resolution, you'll see. So you're doing pretty much the same thing, just voting on it differently. Basically, you're ready to go into the UN right now, and I have more faith in some of your solutions than I do in some of our world leaders, so keep on leading. Next question I got. How do resolutions work? And I've seen this come up in the chat a few times, in crisis and specialized committees. So what's the difference between resolutions for those kind of committees? Is it the same process? So in terms of crisis committees, resolutions tend to go by a different name. In a crisis committee, rather than write a resolution, you write what are directives, and you write way more of them. So in traditional committees, you will write one resolution over the whole committee. In crisis committees, you're given a scenario, and one that continues to evolve and change based on the actions that you take. So for example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that's definitely has been a topic for crisis committees, and I see it being one years from now once it's been resolved in the future, right? So that might be the start of your committee. You would write a directive to deal with the initial situation, but then the situation continues to evolve, right? As it has in reality. There was a bridge that was blown up. This has been going on for far longer than anybody anticipated. And at this point, this has just become far more of this international event and a major crisis in a way that really does need to be solved. For every new thing that's happened, you would write a new directive. The same is true for any crisis committee. And directives are much shorter, and the formatting is also different. So for example, say that you were in a crisis committee about COVID-19. This is something that we're all very familiar with. Say that there were a ton of protests around mask mandates. You do something in a short directive to deal with those protests immediately. So say one holds a press conference to quell protesters, puts out all of this information about wearing masks. That's a directive. So that's what you do for crisis committees. It's very fast-paced, shorter solutions, more concise, solve this problem now. In terms of specialized committees, that's typically on a committee-by-committee basis, so you would want to look into the specific instructions for the committee that you're in. I will say for United Nations Security Council committees, those tend to be hybrid, specialized, lean crisis. You'll write resolutions in this format, but they'll typically be shorter. Hopefully, that covers the distinction between resolutions for general assemblies, ECOSOC's vast majority of committees, crisis committees equals directives, UNSC equals resolutions, specialized equals look at the conference's specific recommendations. And read that question about directives. In terms of directives, they will typically correspond with the most recent crisis update is what they're known as. So the most recent kind of situation update you've been given that corresponds with the overarching situation. So it might be a US president's cabinet would be the overarching, but you're dealing with little small scenarios time and time again. All right. From here, I'm going to get into research related questions in just a second. And if any of you have further questions, keep posting those in the chat. I will get to them. So I got a question from Joy that read, how should we research for different committees? How do we even go about doing research? What are we looking for? In terms of how to research in a way that'll lead you towards writing these resolutions, you want to always start off by looking at your country, right? So what does your country believe that you should do about the issue? What is your country's stance and what is your country's policy? Figure out where you stand. Then learn some more about the topic. Figure out what are the key issues here, right? Issues equals preambulatory clauses. So look into what those key issues are, and then look into specific solutions that your country has implemented. So how has your country already tried to solve this? Do they, say, for example, have a really cool education program, something that's community-based and aimed to handle gender inequality? Do they have this really specific climate change initiative that's really clean energy oriented? Find those really cool solutions, because fun fact, you do not have to reinvent the wheel when you're writing a resolution. A lot of the time, the UN will take things that have already been done and make them better by adding new technology, by adding better funding. Remember that SMART resolution checklist? Sometimes the UN itself didn't check all those boxes. A great example, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea was written in 1982 and has not been updated particularly since then. There have been a lot of changes in technology related to, the sea and how we handle that since 1982. Might be something that might want to be updated soon. So thinking about ways that you can update old solutions, and then thinking about ways to really make solutions that have worked in one country maybe more accessible to everyone else. And what I'll also do is show you all a really great research trick very quickly. So this is what's known as a power search, and it is a very easy way to find out what your country believes that you should do about a certain situation. So you type in cite, and this is how you filter/hack Google. Say I'm looking for the UN website, un.org. Say that I want to learn more about what France is doing about clean energy. All of these are the UN website. Every single one. And it's leading me to a ton of solutions and a ton of ideas that I can use for committee. So cite un.org, space your country, space keywords related to your topic. Don't just Google the topic, play around with keywords. You can also do this with your government's website. Say that I was representing and I want to learn more about clean energy. .gov, Clean Energy Initiatives, USA. Now, I've got a bunch of .gov websites telling me all about the United States clean energy initiatives. So by typing in cite, and whatever web extension you're looking for, the UN website, it'll lead you straight to the correct information. And this way you can avoid the 20 ads that Google seems to give you on top and the Wikipedia. I know what all your teachers say about Wikipedia. I remember this. We do not use Wikipedia. Unless you type cite Wikipedia, which you should never do, you'll never have to look at Wikipedia again. Awesome. Cool. So moving on in terms of further questions, give just a second. So how can I best work with students in terms of leading them to write great solutions? Get them to brainstorm together, get them all to research together, and get them to also think about small scale solutions that they might know from their own communities. The smaller the solution, right, you can always make it bigger. So again, no need to reinvent the wheel. And if you've got students who are all in the same committee, but representing different countries, definitely have them brainstorm together. Their countries may have solutions that work together that they would have never found otherwise. So definitely have students brainstorm and definitely work with them in terms of really letting them practice in terms of going into it. The more you practice, the more confident you will always feel. Next, how do I set expectations for middle school students when it comes to writing resolutions? Honestly, in terms of expectations, if you break it down in a super simple way, for example, comparing it to a class paper and then using normal people language instead of model UN language, it does become very accessible. And in terms of expectations, just cut down the number of clauses that you expect younger students to write. So for example, instead of 10 operatives and 10 preamps, have starting off with maybe 2 preamps and 4 operatives. So 2 issues to solve and 2 solutions to each issue. So start small and then go bigger from there. Next, how does a position paper relate to resolutions? I always get questions about position papers. I feel like we always have to write them, and it's just this one little annoyance of Model UN, and everyone has questions about what the grand purpose of these is. So how do position papers relate to resolutions? In terms of your position papers, typically what you do is you introduce the issue at hand, and then you discuss exactly what your country wants to do about it during the committee. So if you're writing an awesome position paper in which you've outlined, this is the country that I am, this is what my country believes, and these are the solutions I plan on using during committee. Hint, you've already got ideas for your resolution in your position paper. And if you come up with a really memorable solution, and that solution was in your position paper, your chair will know that you had this planned the entire time. Your chairs do read your position papers, and it is so impressive from a chair's perspective if I read this position paper that literally had I want to implement this green initiative, and the name of this green initiative and a couple details. And at the end of the committee, this delegate gets this green resolution passed. That's a really great sign in terms of really working with the chair and in terms of the position paper really showing off how that resolution was going to be shown at the end. Hope that answers that. So from here to get into preparation-related questions, I got one from Simon. Are there any cool teaching or learning activities that we can use in the classroom when it comes to teaching students how to do this? There are definitely a ton of really cool activities you can do for those of you leading clubs, for those of you working with students, that really help to kind of hone in on this skill. So one really great idea is to run mini simulations with your club. So to really do small, short Model UN committees on some of these topics or on fun topics and focus on the resolution writing element. We actually will have a mini sim kit coming out at the end of this week, so keep an eye out for that. You can also do this on fun topics. A great example I've seen is having your students debate whether or not uniforms should be required, and then writing a resolution about school uniforms. Something that a lot of students relate to, you know. Recently, I also had a group do one about nut-free schools and how to handle peanut allergies. Again, something your students can relate to, and a really easy way to practice this with a much lower stress topic. All right, let's see. Next, I'm going to get into the in-committee related questions. So kind of, we've looked into general questions, we've thought about how to research, we thought about how to prepare. So now, how do I actually handle the challenges that come up when I'm doing this during a conference and when I'm attempting to do this during a committee? The first question that I got here, how many people should be working on each solution? So as I mentioned, you write these in blocks, right? So how do we divide up to make sure that we're doing this effectively? That is an awesome question in terms of making sure that you write a great resolution and everybody gets involved. So when you're all giving opening speeches, listen to each other and figure out who's got a solution for which issue. Then when you divide up to write the resolution, have a couple people write preambulatory clauses on the issue they're really strong on touching on. Then pick certain people to write solutions for each of these or for specific topic matters. So say that you're in a committee about climate change. You might have some people writing clauses about clean energy. You might have some people writing clauses about natural disasters, right? So divide up based on topics or based on themes, but definitely do divide out the work. It makes it easier. It helps ensure that you've got consensus or a lot of people agreeing on these different solutions. And it makes sure that you all stay on task. So definitely divide up that work. The next question related to this, how do I write a resolution quickly? Divide up the work. You never have to do this by yourself. In fact, you should not do this by yourself, right? Your resolution will not pass if you do it by yourself. And the goal of Model UN is to come together to write solutions that everybody agrees with, that you want to pass, that you're all involved with. So spread out the work, write these as a group. It'll happen quickly, I promise. Then how do you lead when writing a resolution? How do you show yourself to be somebody who's been a leader on these solutions, a leader in this block, and somebody who may be up for awards at the end of committee? In terms of showing that you're a leader, be that person who divides out the tasks. Be that person who brings out the best in newer delegates in your block and in the rest of your block. So say that you see a new student who might be a little confused or isn't really sure what they should be doing. If the chair sees you encouraging them, giving them something specific to do, showing them how they can help, and that you're bringing this group together to write this document, that's absolutely going to help you stand out. And it's definitely going to help you show yourself to be a leader. And be somebody who comes up with a great solution that is memorable. If you've got a great memorable solution and got great answers to all of the questions about it, you will shine during authors panels, which is when you get to debate these and really show them off. So really bring out the best in others, work with others, but at the same time, allow your solutions to shine while also highlighting other people's work within this group. In terms of how many people should be in a group or a block to have a good block, that is a difficult question to answer because different people tend to do this differently depending on their styles of Model UN. Some people really like very large blocks, so working with tons of different people to get lots of voices in the room and many solutions. The drawback to that is, with a lot of people, it can become unmanageable. However, you guarantee you've got a lot of votes. The alternative is a smaller block, less countries, kind of dividing out the work, but less voices involved. That, however, has the drawback of maybe not getting as many votes. So aim for a happy medium based on the size of committee, and typically chairs will let you know how many people they expect in a group based on the size of committee. So like you're not totally lost out there in the dark. Chairs always happy to help you out. Now, the final question I got pre-submitted, and then from here, I will see if there are any further questions in the chat and then share helpful resources with all of you as promised. So how do you make sure that if you're in an especially large block, that your ideas get across? And this also relates to how to handle the types of delegates who may be really dominating the conversation and may be louder than everybody else. In terms of making sure that you get your ideas across, it's always a great policy to actually make sure that everybody's ideas get heard. So be that person who makes a point of going around and making sure that everybody shares a solution. Be that person who is adding ideas to other solutions, right? Ensure that it's a really open block environment where discussion is something that people are having and where you're helping to facilitate that conversation. And in the case that you're maybe not getting heard, encourage other delegates who've realized the same thing to speak up. Again, Model UN is all about negotiating and collaborating. You should never find yourself in a situation where a block is hypothetically being led by one person who is speaking the entire time within your block. So ensure that everybody's getting heard and show yourself to be the person bringing everyone together and getting all of these ideas in one place. So in terms of another question I got, do you make blocks in all committees? Do. And in terms of the creation of these blocks, you typically get to decide yourself. So it's the groups of students who you want to work with based on similar ideas in opening speeches and all of that fun stuff. All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and start to share some resources. But if you have further questions, keep posting them in the chat, and I'll see if I can get to them at the end based on time. Just a second. So in terms of helpful resources, we have just completed a new series of UN cheat sheets. These are all one-pagers. So we've got a delegate cheat sheet, which is the one on the front. These are awesome in terms of print them out, use them when you're researching for committee, and bring it to committee with you. It's got key terms to know, literally the flow of committee written down for you so you can see it. A fill in the blank for making motions, including moderated caucus motions, which are a little extra complicated compared to the other ones. A place to put notes for your opening speech, and a place to put notes for your resolution. How handy. There's also an advisor cheat sheet, which will help you track your students, go over debrief questions, and all of the things advisors may need. We've got a chair cheat sheet. If you're interested in chairing and want to get started or running a simulation for your team, this will explain exactly how to do so. And I'm going to go ahead and post those 3 links in the chat before I move on. Give me just a second. Should be those 3 links. And then from there, here's kind of a deeper preview of that student cheat sheet. So again, it's got a great place in terms of preparing notes for committee as you're researching. So you can literally put your opening speech on here and be ready to go. You can write out your issues. You can write out your solutions. Hint, ideas for your resolution right there. It's got key terms, flow, fill in the blank, and a place to track your own progress, including how many speeches you've given and all of that kind of stuff. It's a 1-page handy guide to committee. Recommend using it. I wish I'd had this for my first conference, or I just wouldn't have been as lost as I was with this. Then in terms of guides and resources, we also have a ton of helpful guides, resources, as well as kind of mini lessons, modules, and training videos on a student resource page on our website. Definitely feel free to check those out. We've got a guide for how to prepare for Model UN conferences that goes beyond resolutions if you're looking to learn more about those other elements. We've also got a conference selection guide, a guide to debating diplomatically, guides, pick a guide that matches what you're hoping to learn today. We've got training videos. If you're hoping to learn more about Model UN, we've got a ton of super short videos that help explain a lot of really great key skills in a brief way. Definitely feel free to check those out. We also have conferences as well as workshops. So if you're hoping to do Model UN, we definitely have virtual conferences that you can sign up for in terms of training level conferences for beginners that'll walk you through parliamentary procedure. So motions and all of those big Model UN words that I've been explaining over the course of this. We also have workshops in terms of learning how to do MUN in 3 hours or less. These typically take place on Saturdays once a month. In terms of further resources, we've got a club accelerator. So if you're a teacher hoping to get help starting up a new club, we've got ways to help you out. in terms of having one of our experts really helping you out with growing your leadership team, with running a workshop for your students, and running a conference for your club. And we have a podcast. If any of you listen to podcasts, we've got this great new Model UN podcast that is a great way to listen to things about Model UN on your morning commute. You know, if you live in New York, the subway can take a really long time, sometimes. If any of you are familiar with the MTA, podcasts are great. Definitely listen to podcasts. I'm also going to quickly throw in here the link to our research map, which will make all of your research needs much, much easier moving forward, as well as this is the Club Accelerator. Okay, I think that this covers all of the links. And if you want to get in touch with us, feel free to get in touch. If you've got ideas for further webinars, if you'd like to reach out about questions you have, if you've got questions about starting your club, growing your club, questions about this event, we love to answer your questions, as I just spent 20 minutes doing. Please email us at support@bestdelegate.com or give us a call at 646-308-1411. And with that kind of concludes this event. We've got 2 minutes to spare, so if any of you have further questions, please post those in the chat and I would be more than happy to answer them. And for those of you who are going to leave in this moment, thank you all so much for coming. And for those of you who may be watching this after the fact, thank you for watching. I hope all of you have learned something new about resolutions.